We're here with Kate from Pupil Slicer.
Hello,
How are you today?
I'm alright. It's quite hot here at the moment.
Well,
In
same
Britain, all the
same here.
yeah.
I do not like summer.
No, not a fan.
All right. So I have quite a lot of questions here, but the most important one is where does the name Pupil Slicer come from?
I thought it was funny.
Of course. All right. Next question. Where does the name Pupil Slicer come from?
I thought it was funny. I,
You're lying.
what do you
See,
mean?
when I attended the Queer Side of Heaviness panel at Roadburn, you said that this was the most annoying question you got, and you were thinking of answering it with a completely made-up story each time.
I
And I
was.
wanted to test. I wanted to test that hypothesis.
I can't be bothered to make up a story.
All right, so that did not happen. Well, I mean, this completely invalidates half my questions. No, I'm gonna have to improvise on the way. All right. So you thought it was funny. I don't have anything else to add to that. I do think it's quite a funny name, and I every time I'm reviewing something, I can say that it sliced my pupils all right. That makes it very easy for me to do my job.
That's good.
All right. Uh, I have put way too much emphasis on this one joke. So now I do indeed have to improvise my way through this interview. You have a new album coming out. It's your second album, and you have bef obviously before your debut album, you kind of get to play those songs live a lot before you actually get into the studio. How much was there a difference in how much you got to test these songs in a live setting compared to the ones on your debut album?
Yeah, we didn't play them at all, these new ones, before we recorded them.
All right. So how did this feel different going into the studio? I know you've been like having a complete burnout, just getting everything
Yeah,
done
it
right.
was it was a lot of work. Uh, Quite stressful. I mean, we were writing the album up until like a week before we went into the studio, so there wasn't much time to learn the material. Um, and it was a pretty grueling process, like trying to learn it all in time and figuring things out at the studio. But we managed it just about, and now we're playing them live, and they seem to be going down really well.
All right. So you've already started playing them live. How has that experience been? First having them in the studio. I don't think there was any song on your debut album that was not played live before, right?
Uh, we hadn't played Collective Unconscious or Panic Defense live before, but the rest of them we had.
All right. So it is quite a
Yeah,
contrast in how you approached it in the studio versus live. You didn't get to like test those songs to an audience.
yeah, but we didn't really change anything about the songs when we
Mm.
did play the first album songs live. It was
All
like,
right.
cool, it's a good song.
All right. That's a very nice riff.
Yeah, nice riffs.
All
But it
right.
was interesting though, like the first show we did playing songs from the album, there were already people that knew all the words to Blossom. Uh, our first show on the Boris tour in Karlsruhe in Germany, there was people who knew all the words, and I was like, "How do you know the words? The song's been out for like 2 weeks,
All
three
right.
weeks."
Which is also strange because I know the words do come pretty much to the end of the songwriting process for Pupil Slicer, right?
Yeah.
All right. Have you changed anything in the approach to songwriting in between your two albums?
There's a bit more back and forth, so I did less of writing the drums and bass on this album, and there was a lot more now that we everyone sort of understands the vision of the band. I can give a guitar riff to Josh and just let him do whatever on it, and he'll write some amazing drums that I like. Whereas in the first album, there was a little bit more of, oh, I don't quite understand this part. Could you do a bit of a guide part for me to work off of, which I didn't really. There was only like one riff where I needed to write some guide drums, but the rest of it was very a lot more sort of letting everyone bring their own elements to it.
Mm. All right. So do you think it's a bit more collaborative? I know a lot of it has been
Yeah,
you writing the entire thing.
yeah, it's a bit more collaborative and like everyone getting to write their own parts a little bit more.
Mm. All right. Uh, and I know that you have put a lot of effort into the minute details of every song and whatnot. What do you think is something that most listeners would not notice unless they're paying a lot of attention that you wish you would see noticed in reviews and feedback and whatnot?
I haven't seen anyone talking about the pianos and the strings on Sonic Creations End, and I think they're quite cool.
All right, let me note that down. I'll put it down in the review. You can be the first one.
Yeah.
All right. Is there are there such details that you think you're noticing about music that other people are not in songs that you're listening to?
Um. Sometimes I think you have to actively sort of listen out to be like what's going on outside of just the guitars and the drums and the bass, and like listen out for little bits of synths and auxiliary percussion and little rhythmic elements and stuff, because those things are really cool. Um, and I don't hear them if I'm not paying attention, but sometimes I like to listen to something and like try and keep an ear out and be like, right, is there anything else going on here that's interesting that I can take inspiration from?
Mhm. Because I'm not a musician myself, and we have some other writers who are actually musicians. They have released albums. They are playing with a live band, and their approach to reviews is clearly from more of a musician standpoint. So I assume that as a listener, have you changed the way you're listening to music since you have become more professionally a musician?
A little bit. There is a. It depends what context the music's in. If you're just listening to something, then like normal, I don't think it changes anything. But sometimes you can like watch a band live and be like, what are they doing? What's their stage presence like? How are they acting on stage? And try and learn like what they're doing that makes it such an effective live performance, and that's really useful. Touring with other bands is really good for that because I got to learn a lot from watching Boris. I learned a lot when we were touring with End. Um, uh, and yeah, it's good to sort of take note of what people are doing and
Mhm.
see what you can incorporate into your own live sets
All right.
to make them
Uh,
better.
I I have to relate this to my experience as a reviewer because often when I'm listening to an album or when I'm watching a live show, I'm engaging it through the experience of having to create content about it, like writing
Yeah,
a review and whatnot. And and sometimes it's nice to have to be completely detached from that and enjoy it without feeling the pressure of having to do anything with it. So,
mm.
do you feel like you have any pressure when listening to something to kind of figure out what is it that you could change about your own songwriting and what ideas you could pick, and just completely detach and enjoy something without doing anything useful
Yeah,
per se?
yeah. Sometimes it's quite hard to separate the professional music side of things from just being a fan of music. But I think it is good sometimes to actively be like, just stop thinking about it and try and just enjoy the art without trying to analyze everything.
All right. uh, I have to improvise some more. Let me think. Quite recently, and not just recently, but I have also interviewed a lot of musicians who are from way back, let's say, from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. They're quite the kind of people who don't listen to a lot of new music anymore. So they're obviously, when you're young, you like the music of your time. But let's just say, I don't think Paul McCartney listens to death metal, even though Helter Skelter has probably is somewhere in the lineage of death metal's precursors, let's say. Uh, so, what the other way around? Obviously, we do listen to music that's older than us, but your influences, more specifically, the likes of Converge or Death Heaven and Dillinger Escape Plan, which are the three most basic ones that I have noticed. What do you think you'd have musically in common with a musician from the 60s? Because all those are still like relatively new bands
yeah.
from the 90s and onwards.
Um, I'm not sure. I think it's a very different landscape for being a musician now. I mean, I think a musician in the 60s would get paid, which
Yeah.
is that'd be a big difference. I just think the industry was very different. Like there was money to like support bands, labels would be able to do more, fans would buy more music. It was a big turning point and like it was a big cultural wave, and now it sort of died out again. And while the scene's really strong at the moment, um, it's not really sustainable, and it's a lot harder to be a musician now than it was back then, which is interesting because now in other ways it's easier to be a musician now because there's so many resources available to you if you want to learn
Yeah, but
how to
there's
make
also a
music,
lot of music to get to listen to.
and there's a
So
lot of
it
music.
makes it makes it harder for the
Yeah,
average Joe, let's say.
yeah, it's interesting. There's like things that make it easier and things that make it harder now. I don't know. I think the things I would have in common with a musician from the '60s are that I play a guitar and I sing. And that's probably where it ends.
Mhm. Yeah, but I wasn't thinking it in terms of the question of like being a musician outside the actual music. So I'm thinking like
In terms of creating
if you
music.
were to talk about music with a guy from the 60s, what would be something both of you would nerd about?
Uh, uh, I don't know. I don't really listen to much stuff from the '60s. I don't think most of the stuff I'm thinking of was like '70s. Was Black Sabbath '60s? It's the end of the '60s, isn't it?
Quite the end. I mean, I can be indulgent and extend it to the 70s. Obviously, the end of the 60s, early 70s was just huge explosion in how
Yeah,
popular music has changed. For example, I cannot think of many albums that are really important that are like from before 65. Like
yeah,
maybe one or two Bob Dylan albums, one or two Beatles albums, and most of them are jazz anyway. So
yeah,
Miles Davis and John Coltrane, those are the important albums from that era. So I mean, you would probably nerd a bit about jazz if you were from that period.
yeah, yeah. I like some John Coltrane and Miles Davis. Um, I mean, I feel like that's a lot more advanced than a lot of music nowadays. But it's a different skill set to make pop music than to make jazz. Like, I don't think it's easy to make pop. Loads of people seem to think that it's really easy to write songs like that. But I think being able to structure something like that that's catchy and not and can stand on its own 2 feet is quite a hard skill set to have, and just the level of production that goes into a lot of pop music is crazy. And
Mhm.
but then jazz music's also crazy in its own way because the actual like musicianship on display there is insane.
All right. Uh, you're also in a band and within a subgenre where the musicianship of display is also crazy. You can't make it as a three-chord punk musician in the metalcore scene
I suppose not, but I've been trying my best.
unless you're really improvisational.
Yeah.
You can make free metal if you want. uh, because your music is obviously very calculated, so it's the exact opposite of improvisational stuff.
Yeah.
How much jamming does get into the songwriting, and how much of it is completely pre-calculated?
I would say it's probably like 40% jamming, 60% pre-calculated. But a lot of the jamming is I'll already have riff ideas, and then I'll just play the riff over and over with our drummer, and then he'll work out like the timings and try and find something that works with it, and we'll go back and forth and be like, oh hey, try doing this with it, or I'll change the riff slightly and make it easier for him to go over, and then we'll find something that's a bit that sounds a bit better. Um, and then on the post rock and shoegazy songs, those are like a lot more just jammed out entirely. So there is still room for improvisation and stuff for going back and forth. Like half of Departure in Solitude was just made up practice space because we were just jamming for ages. And that was a really fun one. And Wounds Upon My Skin is probably the one that's we're most pleased. That was like the biggest song on the first album. That was entirely jammed out. That was just us sitting in Josh's shed where he had his drum set up in a little practice amp, and just I think we did it in like 3 hours. Wrote that song.
I did feel a stronger post-rock and shoegaze influence on Blossom. So was it because you felt you no longer necessarily had to adhere to being just a metalcore band?
Yeah, I think with the first album we were kind of afraid that a lot of people wouldn't like it if we did stuff that wasn't, because we knew we were good at we've been told we were good at like making the faster, more hardcore songs. And we almost cut Collective Unconscious from the first album, so we didn't know if anyone would like it. But then we were like, I know it's good, we should try it, see what happens. And then loads of people really liked it, so it sort of gave us room to be like, we don't have to be trying to please fans and other people and by sounding like other bands, we can just do whatever we want. And if we think this is a cool shoegaze song, we should put it on the album. Whereas with the first album, it was all like, oh, it's not really mathcore enough, because I was really worried at people thinking we were not hard enough. Whereas this album, I was like, well, the songs that go hard are really hard, so we can do a bit of shoegaze as a treat.
Well, I'm enjoying the treat. Like, I mean, I don't think there's that much people who would like be like, this is the style that you have to adore. If there's anything else that is not what I'm expecting from Pupil Slicer on this album, I will not like it. You could come up with a synth pop song on it.
Yeah.
You could have a backwash
There are a lot of
feature on
people
it.
who say stuff like that, though. They're like, this album's a sellout album, I don't like it, and it's ruined what was good about Pupil Slicer and stuff like that. And I'm like, cool. Each there. And there's someone who was like, songs 2 through 7 are all exactly the same song. And I was like, mate, you need to get your ears checked. That's crazy.
Well, if only I knew which ones were song 3, 7. I don't know them by heart. I still have a lot of time left to that in which I have to listen to the new album. So, what else was it that I wanted to ask? Oh yeah. Also at Roadburn, you were playing with Backwash on one of the her sets or their sets, and I don't remember their pronouns.
Hers.
Hers. Yeah, perfect. How did that collaboration come to be?
Someone on Twitter was like, Pupil Slicer should collaborate with Backwash, and I'd never heard of her, and she'd never heard of me. And then I was like, yeah, it sounds good. And then she was like, yeah, it sounds good. And then she was like, here's the song. Do you want to do anything on it? And I was like, yeah, sounds good. And then we did it.
So that's the power of Twitter.
That's the power of Twitter, right there.
Something tells me that would not have happened on Facebook.
Maybe not.
All right. So are there any collaborations that we can come to expect in the future? Do you feel like being in a collaborative mood?
We've not got anything planned at the moment, but I would like to do more collaborations. It's always really fun working with other people. I'd like to do more stuff with Backwash. Um, yeah, nothing planned at the moment, but I'd love to do stuff with Backwash, Godflesh, Health, um, and loads of other bands. Basically, anyone who wants to collab.
You all heard that. All right. I do remember in the performance the way that you were playing the guitar, the backwash feature, especially live, where I was like so afraid that you're gonna trip on some guitar wires or something. You didn't, thankfully, and that was
Yeah,
really a highlight of the festival.
thank you.
Do you?
It was the highlight for me. I really enjoyed playing that.
Mhm. Yeah, it was a great experience, both that and your set on consecutive days. I think there were, and you
Yeah,
were the opener of the day, so I was not tired yet.
that's good.
What was the experience of the festival like for you, both as an artist and as an attendee?
I got to watch Deaf Evan once, the Sunbather set, and 9 minutes of Ken mode, and that's it.
Well, it
The rest of the
sounds like a
time,
great festival experience already.
yeah, the rest of the time was literally just walking around with gear, doing interviews, doing that queer side of heaviness talk. It
Mm.
was there was just no time to actually go to the festival and see anything. And it's a really fun festival. I've been before as a fan. It was a very different experience playing it as a musician because
There's a lot of it
yeah, yeah,
that you're not
happens
really,
behind the scenes. Yeah,
yeah, you don't know unless you've actually been behind the scenes.
yeah.
All right. And so you have actually been doing a lot of promo stuff and media and whatnot. Uh,
Yeah.
how how tired of you are you of answering questions?
It's
Should I
probably
release you from your pain?
7 out of 10 tiredness. 8, 7 to an 8.
We're almost there. I see 7 minutes on the clock. I could give you a break because I don't actually have very interesting questions, but I reckon that tonight when I'm going to sleep, I could be like, oh fuck, I could have
Could have
asked
asked
them
that.
that, I could have asked them that, and those would have been actually interesting questions instead of my so where does the name Pupil Slicer come from bit. If you could get any living director to direct a music video for Pupil Slicer, who would it be?
Be cool to have like David Lynch or Danny Boyle or I'm trying to think who's like
Michael Bay.
I'm not sure that would fit. It would be fun though.
Well, you could do the trailer music for the new Transformers.
Yeah, we could. Maybe Ariasta or what's the other guy called? Um, Robert Eggers would be good as well.
All right, those are some great picks. I have been to an Ari Aster night at the cinema
Oh,
very
sick.
recently, where they played all three of his movies one after the other. That was a very tiring experience. Uh, that new one does not have to be so long. All
I
right.
haven't seen that one yet. I was
Well,
gonna go
you
see it
should.
today.
It's basically like what would it happen if somebody who's paranoid and anxious, everything that they were afraid of actually happened? It's not all that, but that's the best way I can describe it to someone
Yeah.
who hasn't seen it. And it's insane, but it's way too long for its own good. Which is thankfully not the case for your albums. I do appreciate that you haven't gone the 2 hour route yet.
No, not yet. We've I mean, there were 2 more songs I wanted to put on Blossom, but I decided to cut them because they weren't as good as the others. So I was like, well, I'm just gonna have the album be shorter and be better.
Deluxe Edition 20th anniversary. You already have stuff saved for it.
Already, yeah.
All right, that's perfect. Okay, that's quite the gist of it. Is there any question that in all your media touring that you've done, you wish you were asked?
No, but people have asked that in like 4 interviews.
Right.
I can't remember what I've said.
Something like just please stop
Ask me
asking me
about
about
Final Fantasy 14 is I think is what my answer is.
what?
Instead. Ask about Final Fantasy 14 instead of band stuff.
I'm sorry, we're nerding about completely different things. I'm not a video game guy unless it's a map painter game like Europa Universalis, where you're only doing unethical things.
Just like Crusader Kings in Victoria.
Precisely. Yeah, those are my kind of games.
Sick.
All right. Good. I've managed to go almost half an hour of an interview with you without asking any questions about you being a trans person. I feel like a good ally now.
Yeah, nice. Good job.
All right. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
You can order our album and merch via pupilslicer.com. We've got vinyl, CDs, tapes, then hoodies, t-shirts, long sleeves, hats, all sorts of stuff. So check it out if you're a fan. And if you're not a fan, I hope you enjoy the album.
What? That's it? Like I said, I hope your next interview is way less creative than mine.
Hopefully.
All right. Have a nice rest of the day.
Right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.